Hi everyone, this is Caleb from Safety Pilot. Today in our Foreflight series we're going to talk about checklists. I want to talk about two things in particular. First I want to talk about how to use Foreflight checklists, and then I want to talk about why to use Foreflight checklists. I feel really passionate about electronic checklists in general. I know it's kind of a weird thing to be passionate about, but I was taught in my initial flight training on Garmin pilot checklists electronically. And then after I got my private pilot license, I switched to Foreflight, and I've never looked back. I've always preferred them over paper checklists, and maybe after this video you will too. So the first thing is how to use it. Now I have my checklist option right in the middle of Foreflight. See it right there. If yours isn't there and you want to move it there, you can press this More hamburger button and then go up to Edit Tab Order, and then slide them all around. I like to keep mine in the middle because I use my checklist a lot. Once you've opened your checklist, you've got, let's go to the beginning here. You've got a list of airplanes on the left. I have a different checklist for each of the airplanes I fly. This is just a small list of the ones I've made checklists for. And there's a lot of cool things you can do here. So first of all, you can store them all. And then if I click the edit button, I can click on a specific one and I can choose to rename it or duplicate it. Duplicating is the great thing, probably the best thing you can do here. For example, let's say I have a Cessna 172, just like this one here, November 784 Bravo Golf, the highlighted one. It's a 172 Romeo. That is a fuel-injected engine. Now let's say I'm switching to a 172 November, for example, which is carbureted. Well, the checklist is probably going to be just about the same except for that one step and maybe a couple other ones. So let's take our fuel-injected engine here, press the edit button, and then duplicate checklist. Now, well, it looks like we've already done this. It looks like we've got a 2 and a 3. We can take our 172R3 and go into our engine start checklist. So we can see here on the right now that we've got a whole bunch of steps for starting the engine, and we can edit them by pushing this edit button in the top right, or going back, we can edit by sliding right to left on any item and pressing the delete button. So for demonstration, let's just remove some of the engine start steps that are related to fuel injected engines by sliding and deleting. I'm not going to remove everything for sake of time. And now let's press the edit button and add some new ones back in. We can choose on the bottom here a new detail item or a new check item. Let's go for a check item and say, let's say for example, I'm just making this up, throttle, and then we can say full. Now this isn't directly related, but now if we go back, we can see that it added throttle full on the bottom. And I can hold down this hamburger button and slide it and put it anywhere I want. So in this way, I could pretty quickly remake an entire 172 checklist with just a couple changes from one that already existed. Now, let's say we don't already have a 172 checklist that exists. Well, what are we going to do then? We have two options. The first option would be to import one. Now, I don't have one to import, but I can show you how to export one, and then maybe on another video we'll talk about import and exporting in general. But now, so let's say I have my 172R3 opened here, and I push this button up here, the share button. I can now export it somewhere. So I could export it through email, or I could share it on a drive. This is great if you're in a flight school or a flying club and you make one checklist. You can give it to anybody who has a Foreflight account. Now let's talk about the other method. The other method would be to create a new profile. So if we go back to the basic checklist here, there's a plus button right here. It's glowing blue. Push that and I can either create a basic template or I can pick my airplane type. Let's try a Cessna 140. Press 140 here after typing in CE. And we can name it, we can do all that stuff, but let's just press done here. Now we get a Cessna 140 at the bottom, partial to this because it's the airplane that I own. And we see it's populated a checklist for us, just automatically, all the steps. Now I do want to make a very important caveat here, and that's that you should double check this with the POH you're using. Especially with the 140 where it's had probably many STCs and changes over its lifespan. You definitely want to double check this checklist. I wouldn't just use it without verifying. But it's a great tool to get a checklist set up very quickly. Okay, so this is a basic overview of how to use it. The next thing I'm going to talk about is why would you use this versus, you know, a POH checklist or like a placard or a card you'd hold in your hand. So now that we talked about how to use checklists, let's talk about why on earth we would use an electronic checklist. I've got three main reasons. The first reason is that these checklists are relevant. The second is that they are easy to read. And the third is that they are customizable to an amazing level. So first let's talk about, going in here, let's talk about the relevance. Now, I'm sure anybody who's listening to this video who has flown an airplane before has used a checklist that had outdated checklist items or ones that didn't make sense, or at the very least were in a super weird order that interrupted your flow. When you use electronic checklists like this, you can make sure that you still have every item that's, you know, required in the POH or necessary for your aircraft while putting them in an order that makes sense to you and fits your flow. I don't know how many times I've used a paper checklist for a walk-around procedure that just made no sense to me. Starting on the wrong side of the airplane, starting on the tail, starting just wherever. I can change all of these so that my pre-flight procedures for interior and exterior match what I'm used to doing. And I do that for every airplane. I'll take a picture of their paper card or their POH. This one's built off the POH, and I will just restructure it to my flow that I'm used to. And I'm still meeting all the checklist items, doing all the checks, but it fits my flow so I can do it faster and more efficiently. Relevance. The second thing is that it's just easy to read. Look at this. A lot of paper charts are really small. If you're in turbulence, you're never going to see what's coming next, and you skip items, or you look at an item and then you look up and you do the item and then you look back down and you don't remember where on the page you are. This puts everything that you're looking at right now on one page. If I'm going down here, I know what my next item is, and if I'm not able to reach the screen, there's a button in the bottom right. There's a check button here that I can use to go down the line. I can also have it spoken out loud to me.
Check.
As it's going down the list, which is amazing, especially if you're doing
light.
Instrument flying.
Check.
And the other thing is that you can tell exactly when each thing has been done. All right, the final thing is the customizability, and this is probably my favorite of all the things on here. I want to show you the airplane I learned to fly instruments on. When I was struggling to, you know, look at the checklist and look up, I was missing steps, I was going below my minimum descent altitudes, all that. I added special things in here that you wouldn't find in a normal paper checklist. Approach plate, eyes back to instruments, approach plate, eyes back to instruments, eyes back to instruments. I put in my BC Gumps checklist in here, so I can reference all this while I'm flying instruments. This has been an amazing tool for instrument flying, especially because, you know, my approach plates, this isn't an approach plate, but my plates are just 2 buttons over. So I'm not looking in different places. I'm looking at my plate, looking at my instruments, I'm looking at my checklist. I can do them all with barely moving my eyes. The other nice thing is that I can put all my abnormal and emergency checklists in my in very easy access. Some people have their emergencies on a different sheet, or it's 3 pages in, or it's in the back, or you have to go into the POH. For an emergency, you're probably not going to have time for that. Here, I have all of them listed, and I can add extra emergencies. Say a POH made in the 1960s didn't think about certain types of emergencies that would happen. I can add them in here. I also have all my procedures put in, and notes. So, for example, in ATOM pylons, when I was learning them, I had a tendency to move the throttle instead of using my airspeed to control using my elevators to control my airspeed. So I added that in there as a nice reminder. So in conclusion, I think that the electronic checklist is an amazing tool, whether you're flying VFR, IFR, right seat, left seat, whatever you're doing. An amazing tool for making sure you're meeting all your tasks and you're staying ahead of the airplane. Obviously, I just want to leave a final note that you want to make sure that you're not relying on this as a crutch. You want to make sure you still, have flows and you have procedures and you can fly the airplane without staring at a screen. The other thing I want to say as a final warning is that when you're making your own checklist, you got to make sure that you stay faithful to the POH or whatever materials have been made for operating your aircraft properly. You don't want to go AWOL and make your own rules for operating the airplane. But with that, I want to thank you all for watching, for tuning into Safety Pilot, and we will see you all later.